Threats to public safety and security are sometimes hard to analyze. They're sometimes hard to spot, and we miss many of them. In a land of plenty, we have people who go hungry, and we have wealthy people who have eating disorders that harm their health. On Throwback Thursday, let's take a brief look at eating disorders. Hello, I'm Alan Bonner, and welcome to At Issue. The cliche is that eating disorders are a young woman's affliction, and that young woman is probably upper middle class in a rich country. But that's just the cliche. Eating disorders affect all cultures and economic groups. They affect women, girls, men, and boys, and the problem is growing. Now, Jillian, you have a whole other level of expertise because you've been kind enough to confide in us that you're recovering from anorexia. You've been okay for 5 years. Tell me how it came upon you, what it was like, what you felt. Share what you can, please.
I can't really recall exactly how it all started because it really snowballed. It was one of those things that it began that I decided I'd like to lose a little bit of weight, or I'd like to fit into a smaller pair of jeans. And the next thing that I knew, I was monitoring all of my calories. I was recording what I was eating. I was constantly exercising. I was focused so much on food that I had no focus on anything else in my life.
How old were you?
When it started, I'd say about 18.
Let's go to you, Jillian, because you experienced this. Is the cliche of the secretive, compulsive, and introverted victim who becomes someone with an eating disorder, is that true?
Out there's this idea of the ideal body, and there's also ideas of how we can achieve that ideal body. And it's the easiest thing to control, how we look, because no one can say, no, you can't do that. It's my body. I have the ability to control that, and I think that control is a huge part of eating disorders. And I think that with that, we become very secretive and we become very introverted because it's an internal control that we develop.
And ironically, that control or power leads to illness.
Yep.
Athletes must be tremendously susceptible to making the weight for a particular sport or gaining weight to be more powerful or muscle or what have you. Do you see athletes and hear from athletes?
In my private practice, I do work with athletes who have left very rigorous training where their body size certainly had to be a certain way, and that once that activity or that sport is finished, due to injury or age, there's a tremendous loss and emptiness, and what also happens is your metabolism changes. So you can imagine that after all that training stops, but you're still used to eating a certain amount of food, there's a huge disconnect that happens for that person.
Merle, the treatments that you refer people to and try to match people up with, are they covered by Medicare?
No, and that's the biggest thing across the country. There are very few provincially covered health facilities for eating disorders.
What does it cost to get well?
A lot.
Okay, well, let's blame the usual culprits: TV, movies, magazines, pictures, fame. You know, people are bombarded with the image of what is success and what looks good and what is acceptable, and that has changed drastically. You just look at movies from the 50s versus movies from now. What role is this playing in the people you see?
Well, I definitely see that playing, quite a significant role with the women that I see. I mean, they do talk about looking to sort of these, media images as a sense of figuring out who they are and trying to figure out, that sense of identity, and as being a comment from society about how they should look. And that when they feel that emptiness and are having difficulty figuring out for themselves who they are, what their identity is, that my clients have talked about really looking to the media for that.
And then the reality shows give us a quick fix. You can have a makeover, you can have plastic surgery, have your hair done, have liposuction, and poof, you're going to look fine. That probably won't last, will it? It was perfectly healthy for Jillian to exercise, to watch her diet, to eat well, but at what point does it become dangerous? How do you define the tipping point?
I think it's difficult because socially we actually endorse all those behaviors. We think that they are good and we admire people who can do it. It's when it becomes obsessive, when food and what one eats and what one doesn't eat actually begins to structure one's life, and whether one has done X number of hours of exercise in a particular day. And so measuring what you eat and how much you eat and how much exercise you've done becomes a measure of your self-worth and intrudes in living a full life.
Now, when Gillian was under these pressures, you said 18, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a really precarious time in life, and you're bombarded with all these things. Is there something that we should be doing as a society to protect young people from the pressure of looking in a certain way? And what can we do?
Well, I don't think that we can completely inoculate our children or teenagers from the pressures that exist in society. But I certainly believe that in our homes and in our schools, we can provide support and love and education, helping to create healthy self-esteem and levels of confidence where kids believe that their self-worth, that their self-value isn't based on their looks or their appearance.
Until next time, I'm Alan Bonner, and thank you for joining us. Any views expressed here are not necessarily those of the Mackenzie Institute, its speakers, sponsors, or supporters. But the Institute is dedicated to fostering public discussion, debate, and education about security matters. Google the Mackenzie Institute to join the discussion. The Mackenzie Institute is grateful to its sponsors and supporters. Some of our short pods and long talks are a result of the support of Heathbridge Capital Management Limited, the National Post, and Dundurn Publishing.